Philly in the Big Game is brought to you by our friends at Spicer Brothers Construction, R&L Irrigation, the Leanne Wilkinson Group, and DePalma Dental.
For Philly in the Big Game, I'm Matt Pencek, WBOC, reporting from Minnesota. Now Sunday, Super Bowl Sunday, but Saturday is when we will learn who's going into this class of the 2018 Pro Football Hall of Fame. And with me now is a voter who will have some sort of say in that selection process, ESPN Cleveland's Tony Grossi. Tony, I'm going to hit you with some of the players that are of interest to our folks on Delmarva. Ray Lewis, face of the Baltimore Ravens. Is this a Captain Obvious comment that he's a lock to get in this year?
Well, if you ask me, he is. I'm just one of 48, and sometimes you go into this meeting and you're surprised when you come out. But for me, I consider Ray Lewis like one of the top 5 defensive players that I've actually covered and seen and lived through during my career in over 30 years. So in my opinion, he's a lock that we shouldn't spend a lot of time debating over.
All right, so the next one I'll throw at you, Joe Jacoby, one of the hogs of those Super Bowl champion Redskin teams of the 1980s, 1990s. He plays on the offensive line, or he played on the offensive line. Is that a challenge for him in this process? Because this isn't the first time he's been up for consideration.
No, I think this is Jacoby's last year of eligibility as a modern era nominee. If he doesn't make it this year, I think he goes into that crevice of overlooked players and would have to come back as a senior nominee. So that will be a strong argument to give him, as much consideration as possible. I know he's been through this process before. In my mind, the Redskins' 3 Super Bowls, the one common thing was their offensive line, and he was a huge part of it. So I think his qualifications are great, but I'm disappointed he hasn't gotten there so far. But maybe this being the last year will put him over the top.
Okay, so for Eagle fans of interest, the big game is Sunday. We'll go with Brian Dawkins, fan favorite for this part of the millennium of Eagles era of football. What about B-Doc?
Well, the safety happens to be one of the most, if not the most, underrepresented position of all the position players. Not counting kickers and punters. There are fewer safeties in the Hall of Fame than any position. And there's a strong commitment on the Hall of Fame selection committee to change that imbalance. So it's he and John Lynch are both strong candidates, and I would assume one of them at least will go in. Now, which one, I don't know. They're different type of safeties. Both of them are outstanding credentials, but I think the fact that there's an urge to put a safety in and deserving safeties is going to help him, obviously.
Okay, one final Eagle. He wasn't an Eagle that long, but we'll go with Terrell Owens. He was a key player for the last time the Eagles were in the Super Bowl. Controversial player when he was on the field. I think his candidacy's sort of been of controversy too.
Yeah, this is his 3rd time as a finalist. He's kind of a lightning rod candidate because the board has been really criticized the 2 years he didn't make it. What's surprising to me is that he didn't advance even to the next round. He didn't go from 15 to 10. He got rejected both times. On paper, his credentials are exceptional. They're totally worthy of the Hall of Fame. The problem is when you're limited to a maximum of 5 modern era players out of 15 candidates, they're all probably worthy. And it's a matter of fitting in guys at the right time. And it's only his 3rd year in that room, and I think it's going to be a lively debate as usual, especially with the presence of now Randy Moss and Isaac Bruce is another receiver with tremendous credentials. It's tough with such a backlog to put in more than one player from the same position. It's just tough because there's all kinds of candidates that are worthy there. So that's kind of things going against Terrell Owens. I'm sure it might be one of the longest debates of the 15 candidates.
All right. Well, Tony, we do appreciate your insight on what goes on in the process in debating the Hall of Fame candidates. And tomorrow night, we will find out who will be in the 2018 class headed to Canton. Saturday is for the Hall of Fame. Sunday, it's all about the Super Bowl. Eagles wide receiver Torrey Smith, who won it all in the 2012 season with the Ravens. That was 5 years ago. and this is the first time he is back playing for the NFL's ultimate prize.
It's hard to get here, and I appreciate the journey. It's one thing, I thought it was going to be like that every year. You know, we lost to the Patriots in my first year in the AFC Championship game, and we beat them to go to the Super Bowl and we win. But this is how it's going to be every year. And it's not, unless you're lucky like the Patriots have been, the past few years to continue to be in that position.
That dog mask has been a calling card of the Eagles during this run, symbolic of their underdog status. Another mask made some of the rounds this week. Well, let's just say it's an interesting piece of headwear for the Eagles.
I feel good. I do feel good.
You feel the power?
I feel the power.
Yeah.
For some reason, I'm getting one of those Freddie Mitchell People's Champ vibes watching that mask. One of the characteristics of the Eagles this week in Minnesota, they do not appear to be tight. The magnitude of the game does not appear to be overwhelming them as they attempt to win their first ever Super Bowl. For Philly in the Big Game, I'm Matt Pencek, WBOC Sports, Minnesota.